here until the banjo is off.
No, let's go for that.
There's very few instruments that can split a crowd like a banjo can.
Really?
With the possible exception of like the bagpipes. You are for or against the bagpipes. That is. And what's that?
There's so many jokes about that.
There are so many jokes. Exactly. That is true. And Pete Seeger was my father's favorite banjo player. And Pete Seeger played this kind of banjo, the 5-string open back banjo, as opposed to the resonator or the 4-string banjo. This was the one Pete Seeger played. And my father grew up, children of immigrants to Canada, so the whole emphasis growing up was, work hard, then go to school, learn a trade, better yourself. And there wasn't time or money for things like musical instrument lessons. That just was how it was. And my father didn't ever express any sort of regret to us, or no remorse. He listened to music, went to a lot of concerts. So it was a bit of a surprise when I was a teenager and my father announced to the family that it had been his lifelong dream to learn to play banjo like Pete Seeger. And he was going to do it. And Pete Seeger played a special 5-string banjo. It had 2 extra frets. These are called frets for people who don't play, And his had 2 extra ones to make it a longer instrument so that it had a lower tone. And all you had to do was capo it here to get normal, but if you took it off, it opened up a whole lower register realm of possibilities musically. And that particular model was the Vega White Lady Pete Seeger long neck model. And they ran like $3,000–4,000 25 years ago.
Wow.
And that was way too much money. So my father did the next best thing. He did what he was clever. He found a place out of the States, I believe it was St. Louis, where you could order banjo parts. And so he ordered for himself, effectively, a banjo in a box. And the parts came and he spread them out on the kitchen table. And he's a pretty handy guy, but it took him a week to figure out where everything went together. And we ate standing up, watching this banjo take shape for about a week. And my dad built this banjo.
Wow.
And he put a little, it's hard to see, but there's a little placard that says M. Nash, March 1987, to commemorate the month that he put it together. And then he went and took lessons for 5 weeks before he realized that he was tone deaf. He also, and yeah, you don't know that you're tone deaf until somebody says, you're not hearing this properly. And he also, my dad's, there were a couple things that were drilled into us as kids. One was don't lie, the other was don't quit. Right? Finish what you start. That was mantras. And so my dad came home from a lesson one day and I remember saying to my mom, he says, Ellen, I can't do it. And he quit. And that was, I'm guessing, with a little source of shame to him. And so he put the banjo in its case, and he put the case in the crawl space, and never talked about it again. The family never mentioned it again, this one moment of failure for my father. And my musical career started to happen, and I was mostly a guitar, a little bit of piano, and I wanted to add to my repertoire. This would have been about the year 2000, 2001. And so I was thinking maybe a mandolin, and I remember there's a banjo in the house. I'll teach myself banjo. But I'm smart enough to know. I'm not going to ask my dad because he might get really upset. And, So I would go pick it up when no one was around and just teach myself a little bit rudimentary chords. My younger sister was in on it, so she was my lookout. So if my parents pulled up in the driveway, I would put the thing away, and they didn't know. And I wrote a song on the banjo. And I had a Toronto show coming up, and I really wanted to play it because I like debuting new songs at shows. And that was the only one I had. And at the time, my parents had this nasty habit of supporting me and coming out to see me play anytime I played in Toronto. Except my father was getting antsier and antsier at my performances. As you can guess, I tell a lot of stories. That's just part of what I do. I like telling stories. When I was younger, I didn't have a lot of stories. Not a lot had happened to me yet. So I tended to tell the same 1 or 2 stories at every show. And my dad would get tired of this. And so he said to me that day of the show in Toronto, he said, your mother and I are thinking of coming to the show tonight. Do you have any new stories? I'm like, nope, nothing new, Dad. He says, 'cause I'm tired. I'm tired of those. I'm not coming. I don't want to hear the same damn stories. So I'm like, awesome. In my head, I'm thinking, awesome. I can sneak the banjo out of the house. I will play my song. He'll never know. I'll sneak it back in. Perfect. And I did. I got it out of the house, no problem. And went to the show, put all my instruments sort of up on stage there. And then wouldn't you know it, partway through the first set, who comes walking through the crowd? My mother, pulling my dad behind. Because my mother said, you know, we're going to support the boy, and that's it. And when mothers say, this is it, that's what it is. That's how the world works. And so now I'm faced with a decision. Do I pull the banjo out, risking my father's wrath? Or do I be an artist and do what I intended to do and play my song? And all night long I'm wrestling with it because I knew he would not be happy. And at the time my father and I, we like butted heads, right? We were arguing over anything. And I just didn't want another argument, right? But in the end the artist won out. And I'm like, I want to do this too. So I grabbed the banjo sometime in the second set and I put it around my neck like this. And from the stage I saw my dad's reaction. His head kind of like snapped up, his eyes bugged out, and he's like, what is that doing on stage? You know, teeth gritted, and just, you know, I could tell it was like the tension ratcheted up right between me and him on this. Anyway, I did the song, and the gig ended, and I stayed at the bar. I was playing a bar, because I figured my dad would probably wait up for me to give me his thoughts, and I figured maybe I'll outlast him. I can deal with it tomorrow. 3 in the morning, I finally go home. He is still up, sitting in a chair in the living room in the dark, waiting for me. And he greets me as I come in. And that doesn't even say hello. He just a voice in the dark. And you gotta know, my dad was a pretty serious guy, right? So this was not, you know, he was. So he just, so I walk in, unlock the door, and I hear this. I have made an executive decision.
Oh, shit.
I'm like, what's that, Dad? He said, I have decided to give you the banjo. And here's an interesting thing. Just a side note to this story. My father now has severe dementia. Not Alzheimer's, but a different kind of dementia, likely Pick's disease. They don't know until they finally an autopsy when they're done. And he's been ill for a long time. And about 2 years ago, we could no longer take him out in public, and now he's in a home. But the last time he saw me play, he was at such a state where his cognizance had disappeared. He wasn't adding anything new to his existence. Everything was shrinking in terms of his reactions to things, what he would say. There was nothing new. And my mom called me up after the show the next day. Said, you know, your father was difficult, and he's always he gets fidgety because he can't focus. But when I pulled the banjo out, apparently he calmed down, and he leaned over to my mom and says, Jory still plays the banjo I made. So it was like a little window opened up. And, you know, it's interesting how certain things music is one of those. Yeah, it was just very interesting.